Good morning. It's me, Margaret / Dr. France, coming to you from France headquarters at an undisclosed location known only by that goose. Hope you're having a great day and hope you're excited about paper 3. It's the most creative project that we do, and it's one that I'm really excited about. All of you have been reading this book, Diagnosis, Lisa Sanders, Dr. Lisa Sanders, and you get the opportunity to either adapt one of her columns into another form, perhaps into a graphic memoir like Marbles, as we've been reading, or perhaps to take something from a story from another source and turn it into a diagnosis column. So, for example, if you have a song like Tony's song, where the guy gets too sick to put the moves on the girl on the dance floor, that would be a great thing to adapt into a diagnosis column. You could take an episode of Dr. Pimple Popper if you have a strong stomach. You could take a classical story, like, for example, diagnose someone in Harry Potter with some kind of psychosis instead of wizardry. There's a lot of room to experiment and to have fun with this assignment. And those of you who are thinking about adapting from one source into a diagnosis column, particularly, I would like you to attend to the language of the diagnosis column. Each diagnosis column has a very specific structure. It's like a mystery story. And obviously that structure is going to be important. But her language is something that we haven't really worked with in this class because we've been using texts that are... in the last few weeks, we've been using texts that are less standard. So we started out with pieces from the New Yorker, and that is a very standard American formal English situation. Sanders is also using a very standard American English situation. This is not how we speak. This is not how we think. This is not how we write texts to friends. And when you were reading Marbles, you noticed the way that Forney can slip in and out of that standard English into something else, right? Either because she's writing dialogue or because she's inserting texts from other pieces, like when she's putting in excerpts from the DSM. I think it's the DSM-5 that she's working from. I'm not sure. Anyway, so there's a particular kind of English that Sanders is using that I would like to see you use if you are going to sort of be Sanders. That's part of her voice. And this is a particular voice that is really valued in our society because it's a voice that kind of theoretically erases race, erases gender, erases class, right? This is just the voice that just says, I am an authoritative user of English. We are not actually divorced from things like gender, race, and class in that form of English. No, we are not. That form of English is something that is very much associated with particular people who have a lot of education, people who tend to come from classes that have a lot of money, people who tend to be white, and people who tend to be male. When we take that voice, then suddenly we have the opportunity of being treated like those people, even though we are not. So practicing using that voice is extremely useful, even though the reason why that voice is valued is because we live in a sexist, racist, classist society. If this is the first time you're hearing about this, I hate to break the news to you. Welcome to the revolution. So I just wanted to give a little example of the difference between the way that Sanders explains the situation in her version of standard English and how someone else might explain it. If you would like to follow along in your copy of Diagnosis, I am on page 175 and I'm working from the middle of the second paragraph on the page. His energy was frantic. He couldn't eat or sleep. Words poured out of his mouth like water from a high-pressure hose. But what was causing it? Drugs, crack or methamphetamines were probably the most common cause of such mania, but the patient denied any drug use. So a non-standard way of saying that is, this dude came in who was acting totally crazy. He couldn't stop talking. The words just kept coming out of his mouth like word vomit. Was he on crack? Was he tweaking? He said no, but what the fuck? I'm sorry for the profanity. But again, I'm trying to give you an example of a non-standard English way to explain what's going on that Sanders puts in a standard English way. Again, I'm being a little bit extreme in my interpretation, but I think if you get the sense that Sanders, while understandable to you, is also using a language that isn't necessarily the language that you choose to communicate in all the time, you are correct. And so when you take on the role of writing a diagnosis column, part of what you're doing is taking her structure, but part of what you're doing is taking her language. And this language that she's using is something that you see everywhere. Certainly you saw it in the New Yorker essays that we've already read. Certainly you see it when you read many other texts for class, or, this was from the New York Times Magazine. So this is a very New York Times-y kind of language. And again, figuring out how to take on that voice, nobody thinks this way. Nobody thinks this way. But figuring out how to make it look like your voice is a way to make yourself look like this imaginary, highfalutin, classy, educated, fancy person, no matter who you are. So you're going to get some practice on this paper, and I hope that you reach out to me to talk about what you're thinking. I just wanted to give you that little example so that you knew that we're not just talking about the structure, we're also talking about the language. Y'all have a wonderful day, and email, text, or call.